The story begins like a million others. My wife Tammy and I were married a little over 14 years. We were high school sweethearts, and yes, it's a cliché, but I was the quarterback and she was the cheerleader. We moved away from the cliché when she became prom queen, and I was not included in her retinue. To be honest, she was popular and loved by everyone, but I was not. But that doesn't matter to the story. Tammy received a scholarship from the University of Michigan, and I received a scholarship from Michigan State University, which meant that I would live at home while attending school and Tammy would live in a dorm in Michigan and come home on the weekends. We saw each other as often as we could, but agreed that under the circumstances, it would be okay to see others while we were apart. Tammy refused to have sex, saying she wanted to make sure we really loved each other before we did it. I met others in Michigan, but we never discussed it. I kissed a few, but I never went through with any of my dates because, as weird as it may sound, I remained faithful to Tammy, and I trusted that she remained faithful to me. Finally, in our senior year, my sexual appetite took over. The next time I saw Tammy, I told her it was time to take action or break up. We were at Burger King after the movie, and I told her straight up that if she still didn't know that we were really in love, then, at least in my mind, she would probably never understand it, and it's time for us to move on and look for someone else. She got angry at me for essentially giving her an ultimatum and stormed out of the establishment. I didn't run after her. I watched her leave and decided that she would go out to the car and sulk, and we would talk when I got out. I finished my burger and fries, finished my Coca-Cola, and went out to the car to talk to her. She wasn't in the car, and I looked around, but didn't see her anywhere. I drove around the block and didn't see her either, so I drove home. I called her home on Saturday, and her mother said Tammy didn't want to talk to me. I tried to call her several times, but to no avail. I gave up. When she didn't call me by 6 p.m. on Sunday, I realized Tammy wasn't going to make up her mind and started looking for a girl to help me do it for the first time. My eyes fell on Pauline French. They said about her that she was not easy in the sense that was used then, but if she loved you, she could make love after a few dates. What did I have to lose? I asked her out, she accepted, and we had a good time. At the end of the second and third dates, I received a kiss. I had no doubt that I would be successful on our next date. The fourth date was on Thursday, and Pauline had to go to a family event on Friday, so our next date was scheduled for Saturday. On Friday, when I returned home from school, I found Tammy sitting on the porch talking to my mom. It's been 3 weeks since she left, and we haven't spoken since. Her choice, of course, but I was angry that she would do this to me, so I ignored her as I walked up the porch steps and into the house. I went up to my room, put my bag on my desk, and started writing an outline for the coursework that was due the following week. About 10 minutes later, my mother came into my room and asked why I was sitting there. "Tammy is waiting for you downstairs." I didn't know that. She avoided talking to me for 3 weeks, so I thought she was here to visit you. "Bullshit, Brian. Go there now." "Yes, ma'am," I said and went down to the porch. Tammy smiled at me, but the smile disappeared when I looked at her and asked roughly, "What do you want?" I saw on her face that she wanted to snap back, but she restrained herself at the last moment and said, "You." "Me? You asked what I wanted. I want you." "If you wanted me, why haven't I heard from you until now? If you wanted me, why did you tell your mother you didn't want to talk to me? If you wanted me, where have you been the last 2 weekends? I'm sorry, okay? I was angry at you for giving me a choice. I felt like I had to wait until marriage to make love. Well, I feel just as strongly about not being the only 20-year-old in this state who hasn't had sex. I don't care if you keep it by the time we get married, but I'm telling you right now that I'm not going to wait. Before the wedding. In fact, I hope to do it within the next week. Don't think. What makes you think that? Pauline called me to make sure we were no longer together before we had sex with you. I told her that as far as I was concerned, you were still my boyfriend. Pauline isn't the only girl around. I'll find another one. It may not be that easy, I asked Paulin to spread the word that you're busy. Maybe you should have tested it with me first. What does it mean? Maybe I decided that your leaving and refusal to talk to me meant that we had broken up, and since we were no longer a couple, I was free to look for someone else. I meant it then, Tam. If in all these years, if you still don't know if you really love me, you probably don't, and it's time for us to move on. I wish you a good life, Tammy. I entered the house and left her sitting on the swing. I went back to my room and tried to work on my coursework, but I couldn't concentrate. I finally put it down and went into the living room to change channels on the TV until bed. On Saturday morning, I called Paulin. I talked to Tammy yesterday, and she said you called her and why. And you're calling to cancel our date, right? No, I'm calling to confirm it, but also to let you know that the date won't be what we both expected. I'll pick you up at 7, okay? At 7, that's 7. Thanks for calling. The date went well, and Paulin's conversation with Tammy never came up. At the end of the date, I got a nice kiss, but it was more of a goodbye kiss than a goodnight kiss. The next week, I was too busy with classes, coursework, and projects to look for another girl, but in the end, it didn't matter. On Friday, I returned home from class to find Tammy again, sitting on the porch swing, talking to my mom. As soon as I walked up the steps, my mother stood up and said, "I'll leave you two alone." Before I could say a word, Tammy said, "Last time I was here, you asked me what I wanted, and I said I wanted you. That's all I want today. You. I really love you, Brian, but I was afraid to take on commitment. I kept thinking we were too young. I'm still scared, Brian, but I don't want to lose you." Our first time was like everyone else's. We made love 2 or 3 times every weekend, and although it was extremely enjoyable, it wasn't adventurous. Tammy didn't agree to a lot of things. I was disappointed, but I enjoyed what she was doing, so I didn't argue. 6 weeks after graduating from college, we got married. We decided to wait 5 years before having children, but when we started trying and it didn't work, we went to the doctors and learned that Tammy couldn't conceive. One Saturday, I came home from work and heard Tammy say, "You'll never guess what just happened." "Then I probably won't even try, so you'll have to tell me yourself." Alice Medford and her husband just bought the house next door. The Simpson house next door has been on the market for over a year, and they started moving today. And who is Alice Medford? We were in the same sorority. I was on the street, picking up the mail, when she drove up to the house and got out of the car. I thought she knew me, and then it dawned on me who it was. She recognized me around the same time when I realized who she was, and she ran up to me and hugged me. "I know you don't mind, but I invited them to dinner tonight. They haven't unpacked their pots and pans yet." At 6 o'clock, the Medfords arrived and Tammy introduced me to them. "Have you ever met someone you didn't like right away? This happened to me, and not just one of them. Both." Alice had sly eyes, and her husband Frank seemed to be constantly grinning. I knew right away that I wouldn't enjoy spending time with them. I tried my best to be a good host, but all I really wanted was for them to go away. Frank was studying at Michigan with the women, and the 3 of them chatted about people they knew from school, where they were now, and what they were doing. After they left, Tammy asked me how I liked them, and I said, "They seem normal." I didn't mean a word. It would be great if Alice lived next door. Yes, of course, I thought. We didn't see much of Medford for the next few days, as they were busy moving. They lived there for 3 days until my marriage deteriorated. I took half a day off for a dentist appointment, so I was at home. I didn't tell Tammy about this. It was Tammy's birthday, and part of her benefit package was a paid day off on her birthday, and we planned to celebrate that evening when I got home. Since it was her day off, she didn't get up when I got up, so she didn't know that I was still at home. I was in my office, working on documents that I had brought from the office, when the doorbell rang. Tammy was already on her feet, so she answered the phone, and it was Alice. Apparently, they agreed to have coffee together since Tammy wasn't going to work. The office was located right behind the kitchen in our house. I don't know what it was because of the common ventilation ducts, the atmosphere, the thin walls, or a combination thereof, but while I was in the office, I could hear what was happening in the kitchen. Two women were sitting at the kitchen table, talking and drinking coffee. I was trying to ignore them and concentrate on the work I had brought home when I heard, "Frank wants you again and asked me to organize it this morning." My papers were quickly put aside when I heard Tammy say, "You can't be serious." Of course, seriously, and don't act surprised. God, you've slept with him enough before. It was a long time ago, Alice. I was free then. Now I'm married. So what? Frank and I are married too, and that doesn't change anything. Does it bother you that he wants to sleep with me? Doesn't it bother you that he asked you to arrange it? We have an open marriage, honey. He's free to be with whoever he wants, and so am I. And to tell you the truth, I want that too. Remember all the things the three of us used to do. That was many years ago, and I didn't have a husband then. Maybe not, but you had a steady boyfriend, and you never let that stop you. If I remember, you said it was great to sleep with others, but not sleep with him. He still doesn't understand. He's not an idiot. Of course he's an idiot. How the hell didn't he know that if he's not an idiot? You forgot, Tam. I was there. I was drunk and didn't know what I was doing. Bullshit, Tam. You weren't drunk 3 days later at the same frat house. I keep telling you that I was free then. Are you trying to tell me that you've been faithful to your husband since you got married? Don't bother, because I won't believe you anyway. There's no way that crazy girl I knew back then could resist sex, even if she's married. There was a short break, and then, wow, I wish I could see your face right now. You're really cheating on your husband, aren't you? Not often, but sometimes, occasionally. How often? Maybe once a month. Don't make me drag it out of you piece by piece. Tell me all the details. My boss has a sales meeting once a month, and I'm rewarded if the guys do a good job. How many are there? Only 8 or 9. Not much compared to the 15 and 16 you served. If there were more of them, Brian would have noticed. He doesn't notice you after 8. God, girl, he really doesn't understand. Not really. I always do it closer to my period so Brian doesn't get anything. If it's too far from my period, I create headaches until I have time to adjust. So, when can we meet? I don't think we can. Why not? Too close to home, for one thing, and secondly, Frank will remain Frank. What does it mean? Didn't you notice his grin when he was at our dinner? His eye knows something you don't grin. No, Alice, I can't risk it. What if we get Brian to participate? My Brian? She laughed and said, no, Brian would never agree to an open marriage. Besides, if by some miracle we could talk him into it, he'd find out I was sleeping with guys before I gave him a chance. He would too. Would know other things that I don't want him to know. I sat and listened to these two women of easy virtue kill my marriage word by word. I was surprised that I didn't jump up and rush into the kitchen. Instead of rage and anger, I felt sadness. Sadness from having wasted more than 16 years on a cheater. A woman who clearly could not love me if she could do to me what I heard. They say you can't turn off love like a light, but I can say that's not true. My love for Tammy died in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I went from I'd die to protect her to I can't wait to pee on her grave. When I heard her words, I got up from my chair and was ready to rush into the kitchen, but I restrained myself and sat down again. The damage had already been done, and screaming wouldn't change that. I needed to calm down and decide what to do next. I've known several men who have gone through divorces, and in each case, the husbands came out of it damaged. It was obvious that things were over between Tammy and I, but it didn't have to happen that day. I needed time to think about everything and try not to be a loser. I quietly opened the window in the office, climbed out, and closed it behind me. I got in the car and headed to the dentist's office. While driving, I thought back over the past years, trying to find signs that Tammy had been unfaithful, but I couldn't remember anything. The dentist visit was a routine checkup and cleaning, so within an hour I was in the office. I didn't have a productive day at the office. I sat at the table and replayed what I had heard in my head, getting more and more angry every minute. I didn't know what angered me more, the fact that Tammy told me no, saying that we needed to wait until we were sure of love, although she slept with everyone, or the fact that throughout our marriage she cheated on work, and also that she refused me what she willingly did to others. I was furious. At the end of the working day, I pulled myself together and went home, ready for the most difficult thing in life, pretending that everything is normal. Tammy was home when I returned. She was dressed and ready for our evening out, and she had a surprise. Frank and Alice were there. I invited them to join, she said. I was surprised at my ability to remain calm. He simply smiled and said, "Let's go." We had dinner at Trikakai's. The conversation was about old times, and I sat there pretending to be interested when what I really wanted to do was pounce on Frank and smash his face. We finished dinner and then went to Buckskin's for drinks and dancing. It was inevitable that I would dance with Alice and Frank would dance with Tammy. It was also inevitable that watching Frank and Tammy dance made me want to storm the dance floor, tear them apart, and beat him up. He was too close to Tammy, his hands were on her buttocks, and she did nothing to stop him. After what I heard this morning, I didn't care about Tammy. She was a woman of easy virtue, a worthless harlot, but what Frank did and what she did was disrespectful to me in public, and I didn't like it. But I had to endure it. I wasn't ready to tell Tammy that I knew what a worthless person she was, so I had to pretend. But I promised myself that the day of reckoning would come. What Frank did to Tammy before our marriage was one thing, but he must pay for what he did to my wife in front of me. Alice was sitting opposite me and seemed to understand what I was thinking about and said, "They're old friends, Brian." I just looked at her, smiled tightly, and said nothing. I managed to get through the evening without killing anyone, and when we got home, Tammy wanted to make love. Naturally, I thought it was because of dancing with Frank, but it was her birthday, and I needed to keep up appearances. I didn't make love to her. I had sex with her. I thought about taking by force what she denied me, but again, the need to keep her in the dark held me back. The next day, when I got to work, I called a friend who is an attorney who specializes in family law, which is a euphemism for divorce cases. I made an appointment for the next day. At the meeting, he confirmed what I already knew. I would be completely broke in the divorce. He honestly said that it was better to just leave and move on with his life. Let Tammy file for divorce and I won't resist. I'll still lose a lot, but I won't have to pay for lawyers and court costs. The other option is to ignore everything and continue living. I will have sex and my financial situation will not change. In one small sense, I was lucky. Meeting Jake didn't cost anything. I seriously considered his words, but found flaws in each version. If I left, I would lose my house, basement workshop, and patio with a hot tub for a small apartment, and I didn't like that. The other option, staying and ignoring everything, sounded good, but I knew myself. Sooner or later, it will get to me, and I will lose my temper, and then who knows what might happen. Still, it seemed like the best option for the short term. I could live like this until I figured out another way. With luck, Tammy could have been hit by a bus, and I would have collected her insurance. Over the next 2 weeks, everything went as usual. I showed no change in attitude towards Tammy, and she continued to treat me like the idiot she thought I was. Maybe I'm making it tougher than it really was. I did think Tammy cared about me somehow, but not in the way I wanted. We were just a couple days before Tammy's Women's Day, which meant she would be the big prize for her sales team on Thursday or Friday. I prepared for this, and maybe I could have handled it, but I will never know because something happened on Wednesday that ruined my plan to stick it out. I knew it would get to me sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. I had to go bowling on Wednesday night, and on the way from the office to Starlight Lanes, I remembered that I had forgotten my bowling ball. I usually kept it in the trunk of the car, but on Saturday I was cleaning the car and, among other things, I took the ball out but didn't put it back. I looked at my watch and realized that I had enough time to pop home, grab a ball, and get to the bowling alley on time. I walked into the house and saw Tammy with no blouse or bra on, kissing Frank Medford. They were so busy that they didn't notice me. I hit him and threw him out of the house. I returned to the house and walked over to Tammy, who was crying and trying to cover her bare breasts with her hands. I did with her what she had always refused me to do. Be prepared for a long talk in the morning, I said, rolled over and fell asleep. In the morning, she initiated sex. She got out of bed and went downstairs while I took a shower. After getting dressed for work, I went to the kitchen. She was sitting at the kitchen table, still naked, drinking coffee. She had already poured it for me, and I sat down and took a sip. Tammy started to say, "Sorry, but I interrupted her. "I don't want to hear it. I still won't believe it. You've been lying to me for years, so I have no reason to believe anything you say now. I know a lot more than you think, and because I know I won't believe a word you say." "Oh, Brian, come on, seriously. I know it looked bad yesterday, but nothing happened. I was just leading him by the nose and was going to send him home. Damn it, Brian, it's my friend's husband, and he tried to cheat on her." "Thank you for confirming my conclusion." "What conclusion?" "That I can't believe a word you say. I know everything about the Medfords and their open marriage, and I know that you know it too. I know everything that you three had before while you refused me. I know everything about that just the way Frank likes it. I know everything about how you love, although you have never done this to me. Last but not least, I know all about your monthly sex with your work colleagues." "It's bullshit," she screamed. "I don't know who told you all this, but this man lied." "You confirm my conclusion again." "What are you talking about now?" "You just said that my information came from a liar." "So what?" "Well, my dear infidel, the person I got all the information from is you, so by saying I got the information from a liar, you've told the truth for the first time in a long time." Then I told her everything I had overheard while she and Alice were drinking coffee, and I watched her face turn pale as I spoke. I spent the time from that day until now deciding whether I wanted to stay with you or kick you out. I still haven't made a final decision, but I decided to give you the opportunity to decide for yourself. "Me? Do you want me to decide this?" "Yes, Tammy, you. You will decide whether we stay together or not." "It's easy, Brian. Of course I want to stay together. I love you, Brian. I've loved you since I was a child." "All I can say to that, Tam, is that you have a weird way of showing it, but just saying you love me and want to stay together isn't enough for me. You have to prove it to me, and I'm not sure that you can." "Just tell me what I have to do, Brian, and I'll do it. I don't care what it is. If it saves our marriage, I'll do it." "You probably don't know because I never talked about it, but I have my own kinky side, Tam. I never talked about it because you always refused to give it. I kept my kinky fantasies to myself. What I've always wanted most is to watch you in action. I've always wanted to watch you have sex with another man, and now I found out that you've been sleeping with other men all this time. Am I angry? You can keep bet I'm angry. But now you have to do this to save our marriage, Tam. You'll sleep with other men while I watch. Notice that I said by other men and not by another man, because after hearing about your past, my fantasy has changed. Now I want to watch it. Oh, I know it won't be a big problem for you. I mean, you did this long before we got married, but can you do it knowing that I'm watching? Can you forget about what I'm watching and focus on sex? And then face me knowing that I just saw you do all the things you always denied me." "I can do it, Brian. If it saves our marriage, I can do it. I will do it." "Okay, then let's do it that way. It will be here, in this house. You can tell the guys that I'm away on business, and that you want to experience the thrill of doing it on my bed. You can say that you'll get a boost of energy, seeing me sleep where they all slept with you. They'll buy it because they're already enjoying doing it with you behind my back, and doing it on my bed will be an even bigger thrill for them." "Are you serious?" "Serious as death. You do this, and then we'll sit down and discuss where we're going next. If you don't, I'll leave." When? When is your next reward night, whenever that is? I heard you tell Alice you were doing it. How doughy you are. If I remember correctly, your due date is coming up, so you'll tell me when. It will be tonight. Are you really, absolutely sure that you want to do this? Absolutely. Where will you be? In the guest room across the street. You leave our bedroom door open, and I'll open the door to the guest room just enough to see. But you better get dressed and go to work. We don't want you to be late on one of your big days. Call me before you leave work, and I will hide. Try not to get nervous and look around to look for me. We don't want to give everything away to your lovers. I left the house, but did not go to work. I stopped for coffee and called to say I was sick. Then I went to the store. I bought a video camera at Best Buy and then found a hardware store that sold aluminum ladder supports. Found what I needed at Home Depot. Then I returned home, attached a support to my 20-foot ladder, and set it up against the back wall of the house where I could stand and look into our bedroom. I didn't trust Tammy not to warn her lovers, and I wasn't going to get caught snooping from the guest room. I walked into our bedroom and adjusted the blinds so that there was just enough gap at the bottom to see into the room. He walked up to the bed and looked at the window. This gap would not be noticeable if they were not specifically looking for it. It will be dark, and without a light behind me, I should be fine. The last thing I did was hide the voice-activated digital voice recorder I bought along with the video camera. Then I went to the kitchen, drank a beer, and waited for a call from Tammy. The bell rang at 6. We just left. Did they believe it? Just as you thought. They were happy to have this opportunity. I always knew they were bastards, but they used to be nice bastards, but now they're just bastards. Oh, that's interesting. Actually, no. They used to just treat me like I was an oversexed woman who couldn't get enough, which is true, but as soon as I suggested doing it on your bed, they started saying nasty things about you. It was never about you, Brian. It's always been about me. I'm exactly what you called me. I'm a woman of easy virtue. Anyway, we'll be there in 20 minutes. It was everything I could have expected. There were 9 of them, and I knew them all. I met them at various corporate parties, picnics, and barbecues. And I got a big bonus. One of the 9 was Dan Trainer, her boss. I knew he would be involved, especially since he gave Tammy to his salesman as a reward, but I didn't expect him to be involved either. He had too much to lose if it were discovered that he was cheating on his wife, Debbie. Debbie was the owner of the company. Her father left it to her when he died. From what I saw at various events, Debbie was insanely jealous of her husband. They started by drawing cards to decide who would go first, but after half an hour, it didn't matter. After I had recorded over an hour of video, I set the camera on a small shelf so it would continue to record and took out my cell phone. I wanted to bring a little chaos into the situation. The phone on the bedside table rang, and I expected everyone to run away in a panic to give Tammy a chance to answer. This did not happen. Dan, her boss, reached out and picked up the phone. "Hello." "Who is this?" I asked, sounding as if I was excited that someone was answering my home phone while I was away. "Brian, it's Dan. Tammy is in the bathroom, and I thought it was you calling, so I answered." "Why are you there?" "Tammy's car wouldn't start when she left work, so I dropped her off at home. She asked me to come in and help find someone to pick up her car in the morning and take her to get it repaired." I thought Tammy would be a little taken aback to receive a call from me when she thought I was across the street watching, but it turns out she was a better actress than I thought. But this is not surprising, considering how she has played the role of a faithful wife all these years. She picked up the phone and said, "Hi, honey. Just think of it as a call letting you know I've arrived safely and where to find me if something happens. Red Roof Inn, room 11. Got it. Yes, honey. I love you too." She handed the phone to Dan, and once he hung up, they continued. I thought about leaving the camera to record further, but then decided that I had enough material for what I wanted. I went to Bud's bar, drank beer, and played pool with a few people I knew while I waited for Tammy to call. It was nearing closing time, and I was starting to think that I might have to get a motel room for the night when the bell finally rang. The last one just left. I'm going to change the sheets before you come. When I got home, Tammy was waiting for me in a girdle, stockings, and 4-inch stilettos. She made this especially for me. When the sales staff arrived, she was completely naked, but she knew that shoes and stockings were my weakness. She didn't say a word, she just took my hand and led me to our bedroom. The day had been emotionally and physically draining for me, and as I drifted off to sleep, I heard Tammy quietly say, "Don't leave me, baby, please, please don't leave me." I woke up to the smell of coffee, got out of bed, took a shower, and got dressed. It was t-shirt and shorts with sneakers on the day, and after I got dressed, I went out to the porch and picked up the newspaper. When I arrived in the kitchen, I found Tammy sitting at the table and staring into your coffee cup. She looked up when I entered the room, but I didn't get my usual morning smile. Her gaze was rather questioning, with a tinge of concern. I knew what she was thinking, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I didn't say a word, I just poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down, and opened the newspaper to the sports column. The Broncos beat the Patriots to head to another Super Bowl to face the Panthers, and the sports column was full of commentary and predictions about the team's strengths, weaknesses, and possible key plays in the game. It was maybe 3 minutes after I sat down that Tammy spoke. "What are you going to do, Brian? Will we be okay?" I put down the newspaper and said, "I don't know, Tam. Honestly, I do not know. I feel bad now. I didn't like seeing you in action last night, but at the same time my head was filled with thoughts like, damn, 14 years. She's been doing this for 14 years. 14 years without giving me any hint of what she freely gave to others. Think about it, Tam. You say you love me, but how the hell could you love me and do such a thing? There's a war going on in my head, Tam. One part of my mind says, you have to see this again, you just have to. But the other side screams, get out that cheating bitch. There's no way she would love you and do what she did. The point is, Tam, I need to think a lot. Can my desire to see it again outweigh the pain of knowing you've been doing this behind my back all these years? Can I believe you when you say you love me when your actions all these years have said the opposite? So I don't know what I'll do yet. Only time will tell. I put the newspaper down, finished my coffee, and got up from the table. I'll go for a run, and when I come back, we'll sit down and you'll tell me everything. How it all started, what you did, and with whom. I want to hear everything, Tam. All until last night, and then find out why. Why are you doing this, and why, realizing that you liked it, you refused me? I want to know how you can claim to love me while denying me what you give to others. Time for truth, Tammy. If I even think I'm hearing a lie, I'll leave. Of course, I had already left, but I didn't intend for her to find out until I had accomplished what I had been planning since I heard her and Alice in the kitchen. The plan was simple and completely criminal in nature. I was going to blackmail those creeps who slept with Tammy to get money that would compensate for what Tammy would get in the divorce. It was a risk since they could refuse to pay, but when I pointed out to them what they would lose in a divorce compared to what I asked for, I thought they would agree. Otherwise, I was quite prepared to destroy their marriages. Their wives would all get a copy of the recording I made and let things go as they went. When I returned from my run, I found Tammy sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. The coffee cup had been replaced by a bottle of vodka, and Tammy looked as nervous as a cat with a long tail in a room full of swaying chairs. I poured myself a cup of coffee, put it in the microwave, and pressed it for a minute or 30, and when the beep sounded, I took the cup, sat down at the table, and said, "Okay, Tammy, go ahead. I love you, Brian. I really love you and don't want to lose you. It's a little late to start thinking about it now. I said I want to hear when I get back, so here you go." Alice persuaded me to go to a party with her and her boyfriend Frank. They supposedly had a non-alcoholic punch for non-drinkers. Later I found out that it was flavored with something. I later found out that the reason Alice wanted me to go with her was because Frank's friends saw me and wanted me. We came to the party, and they introduced me to Jared. He clung to me and said he would show me everything. He led me to a barrel of beer and prepared to pour me a cup, but I said I didn't drink. Then he led me to a supposedly non-alcoholic punch and poured me a cup. He continued to pour this punch for me, and I began to get drunk. I didn't know this because I had never been drunk before. To me, it just meant that I was having a good time. I danced a lot with Jared, as well as with other guys. Jared continued feeding me punch, and I became more and more relaxed, allowing the guys I was dancing with to be more free with their hands. Then suddenly, I realized that I had served 11 guys that night, some of them twice. I was able to come to class the next day, but I don't remember what I studied that day. All I thought about was what I did the night of the party. The problem was that I wanted to repeat it. I really liked it. I was going crazy. It was the same with sex. I no longer drank to the point of being unconscious like the first time. I decided when, where, and mostly who. I say mostly because when I was tightening the chain, I got so carried away that sometimes I didn't even know who I was doing it with. The reason you didn't get anything was because I loved you and didn't want to lose you. Do you realize how stupid this sounds? No, it's not stupid, Brian. I had a damn good reason for not letting you make love to me. I did this 2 and sometimes 3 times a week, and if I had let you make love to me on the weekends when I came home, you would have realized what I was doing and thrown me out onto the street. You'd wonder how the girl I supposedly was could be so promiscuous. You would ask yourself many questions. I couldn't let you think about it and ask the questions that would pop up in your head. So because I loved you and didn't want to lose you, I didn't let you make love to me. When you finally got tired of not being able to make love to me and told me what you were going to do, I was afraid that I would lose you to some other girl, so I stopped participating in it and then let you make love to me. When we started making love, I stopped until I started working for Dan. I didn't know that he was one of the anonymous guys I had done this with earlier, and he remembered me. I worked there for a little over 3 months when he invited me to lunch. Over lunch, he said he remembered me and wanted to know if I was still doing this. I said no, since I got married. He asked if I was happily married, and when I said yes, he asked if I would like to keep it, and of course I said yes. Then he opened his briefcase, took out an envelope, and asked if I would have stayed with you if you had seen what was in the envelope. I opened the envelope and found 14 8x10 photos of me with other guys. His price for not showing them to you was that I would become his toy. I couldn't let you see these photos, so I gave up. At first it was just Dan, but after a couple of months he said I would be the sales team's reward for a great month, and I gave in again. You would never know, but I liked being part of it, so I agreed. Now you know everything. No, I don't know everything. I still don't understand why you refuse to do the same things to me, even though you just told me how much you enjoy it. Remember how I acted the other day when you did that? I nodded in agreement, and she said, you knew from the conversation with Alice that I liked it, so the behavior did not come as a shock to you. But what would you think if you saw me like that for the first time? What questions would pop into your head? In my understanding, I did not deny you anything. I defended our marriage. I tried my best to make sure you had no reason to think about what I could do when I was away. I couldn't let you see what I was capable of. This is all selfish nonsense, and you know it. At any moment, you could have said that you would try it to see how it was, and then pretended to like it a second time until I got used to your way. You could have let me believe that we were studying together, but you didn't, did you? But what you did was accidentally let me know what you were doing. You loved being in control and missed it after marriage, so you decided to take back that power and control by controlling our sex life. All this ends now. Do you want to see control? Just look at me. From now on, I'll do whatever I want to you, any damn time I want, and you won't dare refuse me. The first time you refuse, I will throw you out, and you can go live with your friends. I want it all and completely, and you will do it or get the hell out, and you can forget about us making love any time soon. Until I decide what to do with your cheating ass, we will only have sex, understood? And what if I don't agree? Then get the hell out. New mode starts now. Go to the bedroom, undress, and wait for me to come. She looked at me thoughtfully, then stood up and headed to the bedroom. I gave her a couple of minutes. Then I got up and found her just as I told her to be, and Tammy went shopping for about an hour, and as I watched her drive away, I wondered how long I could keep her in the dark, thinking that I would stay, and that what was going on between us now was just a rough patch that we would eventually leave behind. Behind. I was watching Tammy's car drive down the street and thinking about this when I heard, "Hey, idiot!" I turned around and saw Frank walking across the lawn towards me. "Last time you took me by surprise, but this time it will be different. I'll kick your ass." It didn't bother me because I was confident that I could beat him and prepared to do so. Frank was a loudmouth and the type to chat before a strike, and my plan was to yell at him as soon as he got close. I saw Alice standing on their porch and smiling, and at the same time I noticed Mrs. Jolly watching from across the street. Apparently she heard Frank, and that got her attention. I also noticed a postman putting mail in a box promo. In the blink of an eye, I changed the plan. When Frank approached me, I smiled at him and said in a quiet voice that no one else could hear, "You're a coward, Frank. You couldn't beat a 10-year-old. With this, I was able to provoke him to start a fight first. I saw Alice run into the house and hoped it was to call the police. Either she did it or someone else did it, and there must have been a car nearby. The police car stopped in front of the house, and 2 police officers got out. One shouted, "Get away from him. Do it now." I stepped back, and one of the officers leaned over to look at Frank, and the other came up to me and asked, "What's going on here?" Before I could say anything, the postman came and said, "I saw everything, officer. The guy on the ground attacked him, and all he did was defend himself. Look, I have this on my phone." The policeman watched the video, then looked at me and asked, "Is this what happened, sir?" "Yes, and I think Miss Jolly across the road saw everything too." "Did he have any reason to attack you?" "In his head, maybe. I came home the other day and found him kissing my wife in our kitchen. You could say I pulled him out of the house quite decisively." "How decisively?" I pointed to the broken rose bushes and said, "I threw him off the porch. Not that it has anything to do with this incident, but is your wife okay?" I understood what he was getting at and said, "I've never laid a hand on her since we got married. If you want, wait until she returns from shopping and you can ask her. I assume you want to press charges against him." "Yes." He turned to his partner and said, "Put handcuffs on him and put him in the car." He wrote down the postman's name, address, and telephone number and asked him to come into the station to get a copy of the video, then crossed the road and took a statement from Mrs. Jolly. As the car drove away with Frank in the back seat, I saw Alice standing on the porch watching them drive away. I shouted to her, and she turned around to look at me. "Where is your wide smile now?" "Go to hell," she said angrily and went into the house. I got into the car, drove to the police station, signed some documents, and returned home. I went into the bedroom, took the recorder, and listened to it. The bastards mostly made fun of me at my expense. Tammy didn't join them, but she didn't defend me either. I took out the film, inserted a new one, and returned the recorder to its place. I was in the garage working on an old Harley Panhead. I was trying to restore when Tammy came home from shopping. She went out into the garage and said, "Alice called me on my mobile and said that you put Frank in prison." Not true. Frank put himself in prison. He attacked me in our front yard in front of witnesses, and the cops took him away. What does that matter to you? Alice is my friend. No, not a friend. Why do you say that? You always forget that I overheard your conversation. You told her straight up that you wanted nothing to do with Frank and explained why. She either didn't tell him or told him you didn't really mean it. These are not the actions of a friend, but I don't think you really meant it. You didn't resist him. What are you going to do? Press charges against him. Why? Why? Because this bastard came into my front yard and attacked me. Is this the real reason, or are you doing this because of our past relationship? They are inseparable, and you know it. Your past relationship is what brought him into the house and what you were doing when I walked in. What I did to him that night is what brought him here today. He was going to take revenge on me, but things didn't go as he expected. Can't you soften up a little? They are our neighbors, and it wouldn't hurt if we could get along with them and at least be polite. Keep talking, Tammy, and I'll start to think you want to get back together with them." She looked sour, turned around, and returned to the house. Dinner was quiet, and it was obvious Tammy was mad at me, but I didn't care. When it was time to go to bed, Tammy put on her pajamas and got into bed. I slept until Sunday. When I woke up, I went to the kitchen to get coffee and found that coffee was already brewed there. There was a note taped to the coffee pot saying Tammy had gone to her parents. I assumed it meant, "I don't want to be around you." I just shrugged my shoulders and drank a couple of cups of coffee while reading the morning paper. The sports column was full of excitement about the upcoming Super Bowl. There was a lot of talk about Cam Newton being the epitome of Superman, and I couldn't quite deny it after watching the Panthers beat the Cardinals, but I was a die-hard Broncos fan and thought their defense could shut down Newton. I finished my coffee, drove to IHOP for pancakes, then came home and started working on Panhead, planning out the upcoming week as I went. Tammy got home around 4, but didn't come out to the garage until 6, when she came to tell me dinner was ready. Dinner was quiet again, and after eating, I went into the living room and watched TV. Around 8, Tammy told me she was going to bed. "I'll be up in 10 minutes, I told her. "Be ready for me." She didn't say a word, just went upstairs. 10 minutes later, when I went up to the bedroom, I found her naked and ready. We had sex. Then I went to take a shower. When I returned to bed, Tammy asked, "Will you ever make love to me properly again?" "Maybe someday, but now I need to make up for lost years." And I went to bed, turned over, and fell asleep. I have already agreed with my boss to take half a day off on Monday. Tammy worked 4 days a week. She worked 10 hours a day from Tuesday to Friday, so she wasn't home on Monday when I arrived at Dan's office. He was surprised to see me, but I could tell by his behavior that he was not prepared for what I was about to tell him. I remembered what Tammy had told me about her lunch with him, and I used the same words he had used with her. I asked him if he was happily married, and although he was a little confused by the question, he answered yes. I placed my laptop on his desk so that he could see the screen clearly and asked, "Do you want to save your marriage?" "Certainly." "Would your wife want to stay with you if she saw this?" His face paled as he looked at the recording I made from the stairs. He asked almost in a whisper, "What do you want?" I smiled at this and said, "It's a no-fault state, so in a divorce everything is split in half. I don't think this is fair. I don't see why the guilty party shouldn't pay, but the law is the law and I can't change it. What I can do, or try to do, is make sure I don't get ripped off on this deal. Between our savings and the equity in our house, I think Tammy and I will split $82,000. Because of the law, I can't stop her from getting $41,000, but I can get away with $82,000, or at least get $81,000 in the pleasure of revenge. Everything is simple, really. I admit that it is undoubtedly illegal, but then cheating was also once illegal. My solution to the problem is simple. You and the other guys in this video need to raise $45,000 for me, or copies of what you are watching now will be given to all your wives, families, and friends, and I will create a website where everyone can see it. You'll also need to keep Tammy at work and maybe give her a raise so I don't have to pay her child support. Why 45,000? You said your half would be 41. But I have to pay attorney fees and court costs, and I don't think I should take that out of my share. You guys created the problem, so it's only fair that you pay the bill. I expect money by Friday next week. This gives you almost 2 weeks to raise the money. If one of the guys can't raise the money, the rest will have to cover his share. I don't care how you do it, but if I don't get 45,000 by Friday in 2 weeks, I'll distribute the video. 2 more things. First of all, Tammy doesn't know that I'm going to leave her cheating ass, and I don't want her to find out until I'm ready, so you need to make sure she doesn't know what I'm doing. Secondly, and most importantly for you and the others, you need to know that someone is holding all the information, and if anything happens to me, not only will everyone I've already mentioned get a copy of the video, but the police will receive a copy with an explanation. I turned off the laptop, stood up and said, Have a good day. I'll contact you. I left his office and went to work. When I arrived at work, my boss Mike called me into his office. I told him why I needed the morning so he wasn't surprised when he asked what my plans were for the future, and I told him I hadn't thought about it yet. I expected that the only change in my life would be that I would be single again. Have you thought about moving? Not really. It might be hard for you to stay here. You will constantly go to places, like restaurants, that will remind you of your life with Tammy. Plus, you'll probably run into her from time to time, and that will only bring back bad memories. If you'd like, I can see if there are vacancies that would suit you in our other branches. It wouldn't hurt to know what other options I have. Mike said he would take a look, and I left his office, went to my room, and started working. When I returned home that evening, Tammy had already prepared dinner. We ate in silence, but I could tell she wanted to say something but was obviously nervous because she was afraid I might not want to hear it, or that she wasn't ready to hear what I might say. Finally, she plucked up her courage. "Are we going to be okay, Brian? I really love you and don't want to lose you." The truth, of course, was that no, we weren't going to be okay, and we weren't going to be okay. I was already on my way out. She just didn't know it. Considering how she has been all these years bathroom, I had a knife in the back. I didn't care that she thought we might have a chance to get over this, and I said, "Honestly, I don't know, Tam. I have a huge mountain of anger inside me because of what you did. It's quite a big mountain, and I don't know if I have the strength to climb to the top and see what's there. Therefore, I cannot answer your question. All I can say is that we will have to wait and see." I helped put away the dishes, then went into the living room and turned on the TV. I don't even remember what I watched because my thoughts were busy with what I want and what I need to do. Before bed, I went upstairs to find Tammy on the bed, naked and waiting. I could have been a nice guy and pretended to make love, but I had too much anger in me to do that. I finished, lay down, turned over, and fell asleep. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard her quietly crying, and my last conscious thought was, "Suffer, bitch, suffer." The rest of the week was much the same. We didn't talk much, and I saw that she was on pins and needles, expecting something good or bad, but something from me. On Friday morning, I called Dan and asked if everything was going according to plan or if I needed to stock up on envelopes for the packages. "I'm working on it. A couple of guys are reluctant, but I'm working on it. Remind them that a divorce will cost them much more than what they need to collect to satisfy me. Can't you soften up a little?" "Never. In fact, I half hope you don't collect the money so I can ruin all your marriages the same way you ruined mine. I'll call you next Thursday and find out if we need to meet on Friday or not. And by the way, in case you haven't already guessed, this is a cash deal. See you." At 3 o'clock, Mike called me into his office. "How about Denver?" "What's in Denver?" "The office there needs a regional manager, and none of those currently working in the office are qualified for this position. You're qualified, and Dave asked me if you'd be interested." I didn't have to think long, and I answered, "I would love to try it." He gave me Dave Miller's number and told me to call him. I went back to my office and called Dave Miller. We talked for about 20 minutes, and I ended up having to fly to Denver for a longer conversation. I returned to Mike's office and agreed to take Friday off to fly. When I got home, I told Tammy that I had to fly to Miami on Friday for a meeting and that I would be back late on Saturday. I told her Miami instead of Denver because I didn't want her to think about Denver when I was gone. I knew that if she hired a professional, she could eventually find me, but I hoped she wouldn't even try. Negotiations in Denver went well, and I accepted the position. I told Dave that I would need 2 weeks to get things done at home before I could get to work. I returned home at 8 o'clock in the evening. I told Tammy I would be back late on Saturday because I wanted to see what she would do if I left town. The first floor was dark, but the second floor was all lit. There were cars parked in the driveway and on the street, so I had my answer to what she would do if she thought I was gone. I rarely go on business trips, usually only once or twice a year, and I assumed that this probably happens every time I'm away. I drove to the end of the street, turned the corner, and parked. I returned to the house and quietly retrieved the ladder from the garage and set it in place. When I went upstairs and looked through the gap in the blinds, I saw what I expected. I only knew two other people in the room, Frank and Alice. Apparently, Alice found enough money to get him out of jail. I took out my cell phone and set it to take photos and took a few pictures. I tested them, and although they weren't very good quality, they were fine for what I was going to do. I remembered the last time I looked out from the stairs and then smiled as I pressed the speed dial button on my home phone. The phone rang, and I saw everyone move so Tammy could answer. I wondered if she would answer or just leave the call to voicemail. Apparently, she decided that leaving the phone unanswered might make me think bad thoughts, so she picked up the phone. "Hello? It's me. I finished earlier than I thought and have just arrived. I stopped by the office to drop off documents, so I'll be home in 20 minutes, so be ready." I ended the call and watched as Tammy desperately tried to interrupt the process and get everyone out of the house. It was comical watching her try to disperse them. Eventually, she was able to convince them that I was on my way home, and they all left. The men quickly got dressed and scattered, and Alice helped Tammy change the bed linens and clean the room. Then she went downstairs while Tammy went to the shower. I climbed down from the ladder, put it away, and placed it near the back wall of the garage. I walked around the house and looked to see if anyone was nearby. All the cars left, and I didn't see anyone, so I went to my car and drove to the nearest gas station to get gas and kill some time so Tammy could get cleaned up, and then went home to my loving wife. When I arrived, Tammy was in bed waiting for me. Unless you looked specifically, there were no traces of what had happened here in the room. On Saturday, I began the other part of my revenge on Tammy. I started being kind to her, and then I pretended to make love to her. I was sure that this gave her hope that I'm softening up and we may have a chance to save our marriage. After we finished, I told her not to worry about breakfast because I was going to take her to breakfast. We didn't talk much on the way to the restaurant, but as we ordered and waited, I told Tammy that I had a lot of time to think during the flight. And although I still love you, I have a hard time convincing myself that I can trust you. I can't forget how easily you deceived me all these years. How can I be sure you won't do this again? I promise you, honey, I will never do anything to hurt us again. I really love you, Brian, and I will do anything not to lose you. You say this, but how can I be sure? I don't know, Brian, but I'll do whatever you want to prove it to you. I need to think about it more, but there is one thing I have to say. Even though I said I wanted to see it again, it actually killed any desire to see it again. Watching you do what I had always refused to do killed that fantasy. I felt it the next day and promised myself that I would never do it again. I should probably quit my job. I don't think Dan will want to see me when I tell him I won't be with him anymore or for monthly meetings. This is another part of my problem, Tam. You said how much you loved it, and I saw how much you loved it when I watched. How can I, after seeing it with my own eyes, believe that you won't want it again? No, Brian, I used to love it, but the only reason I've done it since I started working for Dan was because of his threat of exposure. Now you know, so he no longer has any leverage over me. Inside, I was laughing at the lying bitch. Every time she opened her mouth, she nailed another nail in her coffin. I hear what you're saying, Tam, but how can I trust anything you say, considering what you've been doing all these years? I love you, Tammy, and I desperately want to believe you. You can do it, Brian. I will do anything to prove it to you. Just give me a chance. I think I'll have to, Tam. I love you too much not to try to save our marriage, but I won't lie to you. It won't be an easy fight. It will take time, and there will be difficult moments. You must be prepared for harsh and unpleasant words from me. I'm still very angry about what you did, and I'm only human, Tam. It will come out from time to time, and it will be hard for you to hear it. I will try my best, but you have to be patient with me. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you with me, Brian. I swear. I smiled at her. We finished breakfast and went home. I spent the rest of the day doing chores until Tammy called me over for dinner. We made love that night. She made love, but for me it was just sex, and we fell asleep hugging each other. Sunday went about the same as Saturday. Woke up, pretended to make love, went to brunch, came home and pretended to make love again. Dinner, some TV, more fake love, and as Tammy drifted off to sleep I heard her mutter, "We'll be fine, Brian." I just smiled. I rolled over and looked at my watch. It was 5:20, but the alarm wasn't supposed to ring until 6. I wondered why I woke up. I usually sleep until the alarm goes off. Something was spinning in my head, something told me, "Oh damn, all my great plans are going to hell because I forgot one simple thing. I cannot just disappear and leave Tammy behind. If I'm going to get my half of our assets, I need to start the divorce process, and my lawyer needs to know where I stand, which means Tammy will know too. I'll have to hand her the papers before I leave so she knows I'm leaving. How could I be such a fool?" I got out of bed and went downstairs to make coffee. I've always thought a little clearer after drinking a hot cup of coffee. It didn't take me long to think things through. I needed to meet with Jake as soon as possible and try to get Tammy served with the paperwork before I left for Denver. I got dressed and left. Tammy was still sleeping when I left the house, and I wondered what she would think when she woke up. I hoped for good thoughts. I wanted to keep her in the dark until the very end. I stopped at Waffle House for breakfast, and while I ate, I made a mental list of things I needed to discuss with Jake. I called Jake, and he told me to come right away. I told him what was going on and what I hoped to do, and he said it was no problem. He could have the papers ready to sign by noon the next day, file them with the court before 10 in the morning, and Tammy could be served with them any time after that. He then told me that he had always had a thing for Tammy and asked if I would mind if he tried to hit on her after she was served the papers. I laughed and told him to act. With a plan to get back on the rails, I called Tammy at work around 2 o'clock in the afternoon and told her that I had to fly out of town that evening and that I wouldn't be back until late Tuesday. The auditors won't be able to meet with me until 1 o'clock tomorrow, and if we're delayed, I might miss my flight. I might not even be back until Wednesday. I need to run, honey. I need to go home, pack my things, and go to the airport. I love you, darling. Let's talk later. There was no travel. I was just setting things up so she could have sex with others again, and I could film it. The more dirt I had on her, the less she would want to fight for a divorce. I actually went home and packed a bag with things for a couple of days. The last thing I did before leaving home was change the tape in the voice recorder. I drove to the airport, parked my car in the long-term parking lot, and rented another one. I checked into the hotel and settled down to wait. Tammy finished work at 5, so at 10 minutes to 5 I drove to the house, parked outside, and waited. Tammy arrived home at 5:35. At 6 Alice left their house and came into ours. At 6:10 Frank returned home, and 5 minutes later he entered my house. At 7 o'clock it was dark enough for me to do what I wanted. I walked around the house and set up a ladder. I got up. I set up my video camera, went downstairs, got into my rental car, and drove to Duke's Steakhouse for dinner. 2 hours later I returned. It's time to cause chaos. I took out my phone and dialed my home number. "Hello?" I adopted a sad tone and said, "It's me. You sound depressed." "Yes. What's happened? You don't want to know." "Of course I want to. I can't console you if I don't know what happened. I'm sitting here imagining you having sex with your friends while I'm gone." "Oh no, Brian. I promised you that I wouldn't do it again, and I kept my word. Sorry, dear. I told you it wouldn't be easy for us." "I know, but I promised you, Brian, and I meant every word." "Okay, honey. I just called to say I love you." "I love you too, honey, and don't ever doubt it." "I'll call you tomorrow. Love you. Bye." I hung up and watched as Tammy hung up. She said something to Frank and Alice, and all three laughed. Tuesday repeated Monday, but this time there were 4 more guys with Frank and Alice. I recognized 3 of them from previous meetings. I set up the camera again and left for dinner. I went home earlier in the day after signing papers at Jake's and replaced the tape in the recorder and was really looking forward to listening to the tapes. If I'm lucky, I'll have some good dirt on Tammy when the time comes. 2 hours later, I returned. Tammy and Alice were busy. I took out my phone and was about to press the speed dial button, but then I told myself it was time. I turned off the camera, went down and removed the ladder. I drove back to the motel, parked and went to the bar across the street. I drank 2 beers, then returned to my room and went to bed. On Wednesday, I called Tammy at work and told her I'd be back by 5. She rushed home at 5:30, hugged me, kissed me, and told me how much she missed me. The bedroom showed no signs of what had happened there the last 2 nights. We had sex. Tammy pretended to make love. On Thursday, when I arrived at my office, I locked the door and took the tapes out of the recorder and began looking for the recording of Monday's call. I found the right place and started listening. Then the phone rang. I listened to Tammy lie, then she hung up. It was just an idiot making a test call. Everyone laughed. We need to find a way to do this on a regular basis. It's bad that you can only do it when he leaves. I'm working on it, Tammy said, but it will take time. I have to get the asshole back to where he doesn't think that every time I'm not around, I'm having sex with someone. Why worry? Ditch the useless bastard and move in with us. I don't think this will work. I know myself and will always want to have my own man. No problem, dear. Any of the guys Frank brings to the party will gladly become your permanent man. You think so? I know it. A couple have already asked what needs to be done for you to leave this idiot and move on to them. Wasn't Denny one of them? Just yes. Why do you ask? Are you interested? It's nice looking and well equipped. Oh, you bitch, and they all laughed when the recording ended. I didn't even listen to the second tape. If I had not already decided to get rid of my unfaithful wife, then what I just heard would have done it for me. I'm leaving. I had everything I needed, so I took a deep breath and got to work. At 3 o'clock, I called Dan. I half hope you don't have money so I can start mailing. I have. It wasn't easy, but I got it. Let's do it tonight instead of tomorrow then. Fits? Let's do it. Meet me at Bud's bar at 7 today. I will be there. I was sitting in a booth waiting for him when he arrived. I took a chance that he liked beer and ordered him a course. Tina brought it over as soon as he sat down. He handed me the case and I took it and placed it next to me on the seat. Aren't you going to count him? Not necessary. If it's not enough, you know what I will do. How can I be sure that you won't do this anyway? We both know what your wife will do if she sees the video. You'll be history and you won't be able to keep Tammy at work. I need her to work so I don't have to pay her child support. I think you should give her a raise if you continue to use her as a reward for your salespeople. Oh, I'm going to. In fact, she came to me this week and said that you are suspicious of her, and she promised you that she would stop. Then she laughed and told me that all that needed to change was the location. Now it would happen at work, not after. There is one thing I want to explain to you. I never blackmailed her. She recognized me during the interview, and I recognized her too, and remembered, and wanted to be able to do it again. We started doing this before the end of her first week with me. One day, after a passionate long lunch, I was talking about declining sales, and that I might have to start laying people off, and she suggested that there could be an award for the best salesperson of the month, and from then on it grew to a group award if the month was successful. Are you sure you can't accept this and stay with her? Never. Some guys could do it, but I'm not one of them. I am one of those who believes that my woman belongs only to me, and if she ceases to be only mine, the relationship ends. I looked at my watch and said I had to go. I stood up and said, "Take care of Tammy, okay? I loved her once." When I got home, I acted like things would work out between us and was even affectionate when we made love. She snuggled up to me after that. She had no idea that this was our last time. It was a normal Friday morning until I left the house. I drove to U-Haul and picked up the trailer I had reserved, then drove back to our area. I parked a block away and went to make sure Tammy's car was gone. After making sure she left for work, I pulled the U-Haul up to the garage door, and by 1 p.m. I had everything I wanted out of the house. When I picked up the trailer, I also stopped by the bank and, just to be an asshole, withdrew 70% from our checking and savings accounts instead of the 50% I was legally entitled to in the divorce. I may have to return some later, but like I said, I was an asshole. I drove the car and trailer down the block and back to the house, then sat down at the kitchen table and started canceling credit cards and setting the scene for Tammy when she got home from work. I hoped that luck would be on my side and my timing would work. She entered the house at 5:20 and, seeing that my car was not in the entrance, was surprised to see me. She came up to me, leaned in to kiss me, and I let her. She started to open her mouth to probably ask where my car was, but I raised my hand and said, "Sit down, Tammy. We need to talk." She looked at me worriedly. "About what?" "About us. We'll be fine, Brian. You said we'd work it out." "We're not going to be okay, Tammy, for all the reasons I talked about. Especially because I can't trust you." I promised, Brian, I'm not, anymore. I hit the table with my hand and shouted, "You lied." I turned the laptop so she could see the screen and turned it on. I watched her face as she watched the scene with Frank and Alice from the other night. There was no sound, but when she saw her answering the phone, I pressed a button on the recorder and she heard her words, watching herself say them on the screen. She looked at the screen silently and pale. The doorbell rang, and I said, "You need to open it, Tam. This is for you." She looked at me blankly, and I said, "Go. This is for you." She stood up and opened the door. I wish I could have seen her face when she opened the door, received the envelope, and heard the words, "You have been served with a notice." The court courier was waiting in the opposite car when she arrived home, and I asked him to give me 10 minutes before ringing the doorbell. She returned to the kitchen, sat down, and stared at the envelope in her hands. Then she looked at me and asked weakly, "What should I do now? Continue living without me? You can handle this. You don't have to quit your job and give up bonus nights. You have 2 clowns in your neighborhood who will be your permanent partners, and you already have an idea who will replace me, right? Denny, a guy who looks good and is well equipped." She had the courage to wince at that. "The only big decision you have to make is whether to buy my half of the house or sell it, and we'll split the money. I'm leaving town, and my lawyer's business card is in an envelope. He knows how to find me if he needs it, but I doubt you'll need it. You never wanted me, and I doubt you ever did. I heard what you said, Tammy. I'm leaving you the laptop. It contains hours of your writing, proving to me that I could never trust you. Just look at it every now and then when you wonder why I left." I stood up and walked out of the house, leaving a crying Tammy at the kitchen table. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.